I have put together all of my videos talking about things that have been removed from Brawl Stars to create a mega video, so sit back, relax, and enjoy over 60 things that were removed from Brawl Stars. Brawl Stars was first launched in June of 2017, and since then it has gone through hundreds of different updates. And in this time, many different features were added and removed, and today we're going to be going over 20 things that Brawl Stars has removed in the last 6 years. In the current version of Brawl Stars, you will only find the amount and corresponding prices when you buy gems in the shop, but that wasn't the case before. These gems used to have special names. Things like pouch of gems, fishful of gems, and so on used to be on each gem pack, which made them feel a little more special, but Brawl Stars have now removed that and it's just a number of gems now, which obviously isn't a massive difference, but is a bit of a pointless thing to remove in my opinion. Supercell's first game started on Facebook, and since then, many of their other games also have options to connect to Facebook and log in using that. But that feature was removed for Brawl Stars in 2021, seemingly out of the blue. My guess as for why is because not many people who played Brawl Stars actually use Facebook, and it probably was better for them money-wise to just get rid of the feature entirely. Rarity boxes were kind of like brawl boxes, but specifically for brawlers. The rarity boxes obviously came in different rarities and would give a random brawler of that rarity. It was removed a while ago and got replaced with the brawler offers, which were purchasable by gems and pretty much acted like the same thing. And a little bonus, this was also removed when Brawl Stars implemented the Star Road into the game. When Brawl Stars was first launched, it had the tap to move option, which is where you would tap the spot on the screen that you wanted your brawler to move to. Obviously, you can see how this kind of limits the movement and is much harder to use in the joystick controls that people use now. The tap to move controls were pretty old and got removed very early on in the game, meaning a lot of people didn't even have to deal with them. Having ads in mobile games isn't really a new thing. In fact, it's common in many different mobile games. However, Brawl Stars was the first Supercell game that had these ads. But the interesting part was that their ads just promoted their own games, mainly Clash of Clans. And these ads were fully optional and weren't annoying in any way. You could just watch them to get things like double coins from the rewards from the Brawl boxes. The most likely reason they removed the ads was because they're probably very ineffective, because if you see the same ads for the same games every time, it just really isn't going to matter or be beneficial to anyone. This was a game mode that was released in July 2021, but removed only a week later. It starts with 2 teams of 3 players and the objective is to hold the trophy for as long as possible. You get a speed nerf when you have the trophy and can throw it around to your teammates. But why was it removed so quickly? Well, the biggest reason was that the gameplay just wasn't fun, since people were just hoarding the trophy and they were using tanky or speedy brawlers, which just helped them hoard the trophy even more. This made the gameplay boring and many people hated this game mode, which is why it was removed so quickly. Star points were a special currency that you couldn't buy. The only way to get them would be to rank up your brawlers, progress to the trophy and power leagues, or earn them from certain quests or challenges. They were used to buy special skins in the game called Star Skins. Each Power League season had an exclusive skin that we only purchased during the season and would never come back, which made the Star Points a pretty valuable currency if you were into collecting skins. But they were removed in April 2023, and now skins can be bought with either gems or the new currency Bling, which is meant to replace the Star Points. Destroy TNT automatically explodes and does 2000 damage to the brawlers while destroying other nearby objects. Unlike other removed features in this video, TNT wasn't completely removed. It used to be found in Heist a while ago, but now you really only see it in training or custom maps. Elixir is a common resource across Supercell games like Clash Royale and Clash of Clans, and it also used to play an important role in Brawl Stars until it was removed. Elixir was an important currency and it was what was used to upgrade the different statistics of the brawlers. Events such as Robo Rumble, Boss Fight, and Big Game opened only on weekends and were only playable if you could pay tickets. You got some free tickets every time a new event started, but you could buy many more with gems. And there's also the chance of getting them from boxes. It was more beneficial to have more tickets because your rewards depended on the number of tickets you used to play, which obviously favored people with more tickets. However, the tickets would end up getting removed in 2020 and now all events were free and you could play unlimited times, but with a limit on the number of tokens you could get as a reward. Brawl Stars actually used to be played vertically instead of horizontally when it was first created, but they ended up changing it to horizontal before the game globally launched, and I think the game is much better this way, and I can't even imagine playing the game as it is now on a vertical screen. It was first introduced in October of 2019 and it was a competitive mode. The only way you could play it was by using a brawler which you had earned a star power with. You would earn power play points after each match, but the biggest problem in my opinion was that you could only play 3 matches in a day, and that meant in one season you could only play 42 games max. And in this game mode, there were multiple other game modes that you could play, such as Heist, Siege, Brawl Ball, Lone Star, Takedown, and many more. At the end of a season, your points would be added up and you would see how you place on the leaderboard, and the top 200 players got star points. Additionally, you also got star points for the number of power points you managed to earn during the season, with the max being 10,000. And in the year after being released, there were just some minor adjustments and game mode changes, but about a year and a half later, Power Play was shut down and instead replaced with Power League. This was very similar, but in this you could play an unlimited amount of matches, the seasons were longer, and there were also a couple of other changes which overall made it better than Power Play. The objective of the game mode was to basically kill the most enemies without dying. Everyone started with 2 stars and would get additional stars for killing enemies, and if you died, you would be reset back to 2. At the end of the 2 minutes, whoever had the most stars would win, and it was a pretty fun and simple game mode in my opinion. It would end up getting removed due to 2 main problems. The first one was a massive kill stealing problem that made it not fun, and the second problem was that it was a bit too much luck based in terms of your spawns. This is a star power for Poco. It was one of the original star powers that came out in the star power update, and not many people seem to really know about it. This is because it wasn't really that good, which is why people just didn't use it. It gave 1000 health to friendly brawlers, but that was it. It ended up getting reworked and named to Da Capo, and it now instead made it so it would now heal friendly brawlers that it specifically hit. This was a map for the Gem Grab event that just recently got removed. It was originally called Mushroom Cave when it released in 2017 and later renamed to Deathcap Cave before finally being renamed to Deathcap Trap. It ended up getting removed just a few days ago and was replaced by Spruce Up, which is the Brawl Days version. Brawl boxes are probably one of the most famous and well-known things about Brawl Stars, but these did end up getting removed. They used to be the main way for people to unlock brawlers and get other rewards, but it was also really seen as a pay-to-win thing. So Brawl Stars would end up removing it and it would get replaced by a progression-based unlock system, which was not dependent on luck and was something a free-to-play player could enjoy. When power points were introduced to replace Elixir, it came with a limit known as the PowerPoint cap. There were tons of different ways for players to get PowerPoints since they are one of the most used and most common currencies in the game. PowerPoints are usually saved and used to upgrade brawlers to the next power level. However, a player could only have a maximum of 4,000 in their account before it was later increased to 99,999 on October of 2023, and 3 weeks later the limit was completely removed and players could now have as many PowerPoints as they wanted. This is another community map that has been removed from the game. Rush Hour was a community map for the Hot Zone event, but was removed about 2 months after it was introduced into Brawl Stars. Rush Hour was added in February 2023 and removed on April 25th of 2023. And it isn't really well known why it was removed in a relatively short period of time. Now, these are something that were removed pretty early on in the game and something that not many people have really used. Crests are like abilities for the brawlers and were purchasable with tokens. You got them by filling up a group of upgrades, and after getting all 3 crests, you unlock the special ability for the brawlers. And all these abilities basically gave you a boost in whatever stat they were unlocked for, but they would end up getting removed. And for the final removed feature, we have the club shop, which was just removed a few days ago. And with the removal of the club shop, the club points were also obviously removed. Previously, people mainly used these points to buy coins and power points, and it was seen as something really good for free-to-play players. And because of this removal, half of your club points got turned into coins, and the other half was turned into power points. Brawl Stars has been around for over 6 years, and over time, they've added and removed many different game modes. And today we will be going through the history of these removed game modes, starting with Power Play, which was removed over 900 days ago. It was first introduced in October of 2019 and was a competitive mode. The only way you could play it was by using a brawler which you had earned a star power with. You could earn power play points after each match, but the biggest problem in my opinion was that you could only play 3 matches in a day, and that meant in one season you could only play 42 games max. And in this game mode there were multiple other game modes that you could play, such as Heist, Siege, Brawl Ball, Lone Star, Takedown, and more. At the end of a season, your points would be added up and you would see how you placed on the leaderboard, and the top 200 players got star points. Additionally, you also got star points for the number of power points you managed to earn during the season, with the max being 10,000. And in the year after being released, there were just some minor adjustments and game mode changes, but about a year and a half later, Power Play was shut down and instead replaced with Power League. This was very similar, but in this you could play an unlimited amount of matches, the seasons were longer, and there were also a couple of other changes. But moving on to the next game, which is Lone Star. Now this one was actually added in September of 2019, a month before Power Play. The objective of the game mode was to basically kill the most enemies without dying. Everyone started with 2 stars and will get additional stars for killing enemies, and if you died, you would be reset back to 2. At the end of the 2 minutes, whoever had the most stars would win, and it was a pretty fun and simple game mode in my opinion. So why did it get removed? Well, there were 2 massive problems with the game mode. One was the kill stealing. A lot of players would just wait for 2 people to fight and get each other low, and then towards the end come in and steal the kills, and in turn getting the stars for not putting in too much effort. And obviously third partying is a tactic used in pretty much all fighting games, but people just hated it so much in Brawl Stars that it was one of the reasons the game mode got removed. The second reason was luck. It was honestly just kind of a luck based game on if you managed to stay alive or not, since at any moment you could get ganged up on and killed pretty fast. The mode got removed in January of 2020, but it was reintroduced with minor changes over a year later. But unfortunately it wasn't enough and it was removed just a month later. Next up, we have a game mode with quite a long history of interesting changes. It was called Present Plunder when it was first released in December of 2019 as a game mode in the Brawl Days event, and was clearly a Christmas themed game mode. And due to this, it was removed in January of 2020 and reintroduced in December again for the holidays, and once again, it was removed in January. But in July of 2021, it was renamed to Trophy Thieves in an attempt to repurpose the game mode into a non-holiday theme, and was reintroduced into the game with the tilt modifier removed and the maps having some big changes. But this only lasted a week as the game mode was removed once again. However, it was added back in December but with a new name this time called Snowtail Thieves. and removed in early January of 2023. And as of most recently, it was renamed to Pumpkin Plunder and added back for Halloween of this year, and it just got removed on November 23rd. So this game mode seems to be one that just keeps on getting added and removed depending on the season, so I thought it was interesting enough to add to this list. After this, you have Super City Rampage, which came out in July of 2020. This was actually a PvE mode where you teamed up with 2 others to beat a monster before it destroyed all the buildings. And after each win, the difficulty increased, and at a point it became almost impossible without having to use glitches or exploits, which there were quite a lot of at launch, and that calls for an emergency patch just 6 days after release to fix those exploits and adjust the difficulty levels and some other balance changes. The game mode lasted a little under 2 years when it was removed in March of 2022. The reason it got shut down is because not many people played it and most people just got bored of it quickly. It was definitely one of the least fun game modes at the time, and the only reason people would play it would be to get the 500 token reward. The next game mode was Hold the Trophy, and it was released in July of 2021, but removed only a week later. This game mode was very similar to Tail Tag and Fall Guys, if you know what that is. It starts with 2 teams of 3 players, and the objective is to hold the trophy for as long as possible. You get a speed nerf when you have the trophy and can throw it around to your teammates. So, why was this one removed so quickly? Well, one massive problem was people just hoarding the trophy, which I guess is the objective of the game, but obviously doesn't make it fun for the opposing team. Another issue was that most people just played with tanky or speedy brawlers, as those were what allowed people to just hoard them and not die with them. The game mode could definitely have been more fun with some balance changes, but unfortunately it was just so not fun to play that it only lasted a week. This next game mode was called Hunters and was released in June of 2022 and lasted just under 4 months. In this one, I'm surprised it even made it that far when Hold the Trophy only made it a week. The game started with 10 solo players and the whole objective was to just get 6 kills. And I'm sure you can see that there are many problems with this. First of all, 6 kills is way too less in a game that has a 3-minute limit, especially considering that you don't lose your progress like in Lone Star if you die. Another massive problem was the spawns. The spawning was completely random, and if you happened to spawn far from everyone else at the beginning, then you were almost guaranteed to lose. And if someone happened to spawn next to you while you were low or in the middle of fighting someone, you were also pretty much guaranteed to die. And another problem, which is similar in Lone Star, was the teaming. And obviously you guys can understand why that is bad for regular players. The next and most recent game mode is called Last Stand and was just released in September of 2022 and removed 2 weeks later. It's somewhat similar to Super City Rampage in that 3 players team up and fight the AI instead of other players. In this, you and your team would have to defend 8-bit from hostile enemies for 2 minutes each round. And after every successful round, the difficulty would increase, much like in Super City Rampage. I never got to play this game mode, but from what I've heard, the biggest problem with this one was that 8-bit was just walking to the enemies, and that made it extremely difficult to defend. On top of that, it also just got boring pretty quickly, similar to Super City Rampage. And it's no surprise that it only lasted 2 weeks. Those have been most of the game modes that are currently removed and don't really have a scope of coming back, but there's also one honorable mention, which is Takedown. I know this game mode is still available, but it has been removed so many times that I feel like I just have to talk about it. It was first introduced in September of 2019 and since then has had a lot of changes made to it and has been removed twice for varying periods of time. And the first time it was added back, it only lasted 2 days before being removed again. 2 years later, it was finally added back again in June of 2023 and then removed again in September. Star powers were introduced in December of 2017 and since then over 100 star powers have been added into the game. But but multiple others have been taken away for various reasons, and today we're going to be talking about 9 of them and seeing what they were and why they got removed, so let's get right into it. First up, we have Poco's Swan Song, which was the first one to ever get removed. It was one of the original star powers that came out in the star power update, and not many people seem to really know about it. This is because it just wasn't really that good, which is why people just didn't use it and is why it got removed after only 11 days of it being out. How it worked was that once Poco died, he would play a song called the Swan Song, and this is what would give all nearby friendly brawlers 1000 health. And this was a pretty bad star power for multiple reasons. First of all, it just wasn't useful in solo game modes since at the time there's only one star power available, meaning you had to pick this one and it just wouldn't help in solo situations or anything, which sucked. Plus, in order for the star power to work, you actually had to die, meaning it couldn't actually help you in the game. It would only help teammates that were near you, and this overall made it pretty useless, and is why it got removed literally 11 days after it was added. It would end up getting replaced with another star power called the Capo, which was much better than the Swan Song because this allowed you to actually provide value while you were still alive, and is the reason why this star power is still in the game. But next up we have Extra Life, which was a star power for 8-bit. And this was one of the most hated and most OP star powers to have ever existed in the game. This star power literally would give 8-bit an extra life, which is how it obviously got its name. And while this wasn't too OP in the 3v3 mode since respawning already existed, in Showdown it was just extremely OP and broken because, well, you had 2 lives in a game mode with no respawning. This basically just gave you such an insane advantage over everyone else since you could almost guarantee a win every game. All you had to do was just camp for a bit and wait it out to the final zone, since you would have 2 lives to kill 1 or 2 enemy brawlers, and there was really no way you could lose unless you were just bad at the game. And I mean, you could also just play it super aggressive and attack everyone, since you knew you had a second life to fall back on if you ended up dying. And this overall just made this an insanely broken star power that everyone who didn't play 8-bit just absolutely hated. And considering how strong it was in the game for quite a while. But it just kept on getting more and more nerfed, but eventually Supercell gave up since there's no way to make it not OP without removing it, which is what they did and replaced it with Plugged In, which just gave him a speed boost when he was near his turret. And this was a much more tame star power, and I think most people definitely preferred this over Extra Life. But next up we have Pat on the Back, which was a star power for Jean, and it was arguably one of the worst and most hated star powers when it was introduced, and is why it was also removed just 3 weeks later. What this star power did was just heal a friendly brawler for 2000 HP. I mean, that was literally it. There wasn't much else to it, and one massive problem with it was that it was just extremely situational. I mean, how often is it that you need to give your teammate 2000 extra health in order for them to win a fight or something? Like, it could definitely be useful in those situations, but those were also just rare and it wasn't really anything worthwhile having. Plus, it also kind of clashed with the super, since that is supposed to bring in an enemy to make it easier for you to kill them, but this star power would do nothing to help with that. Also, his other star power also only healed teammates, meaning none of his star powers could help with this super and none of them could even help the player, which also just made it not that fun to play. Since, in my opinion, I think the best balance is having one star power that helps you and one star power that helps your teammates. But like I said, it ended up getting removed 3 weeks later and got replaced with Spirit Slap, which was much better since it actually did damage and just added pretty much 2k more to the super, which was great. But next up, we have Second Wind, which was a star power for Gale, and honestly, this was pretty much like Pat on the Back 2.0. It was also extremely hated by the community and it ended up getting removed 4 months later. This star power was also arguably even worse than Gale's, since it will give teammates a 20% speed boost if they were hit by your super, and this lasted for only 2 seconds. There would literally be like no situation where this would ever be useful because his super is meant to push back the enemy, and if your teammate was in between you and the enemy, what would happen is that the enemy gets pushed back farther from your teammate, but they get a speed boost, and those kind of cancel each other out, and at the end of the day, literally nothing good happens. And so it obviously got removed and instead replaced with freezing snow, which was better since it slowed down the enemy for 0.3 seconds, which did much more than speeding up your teammates. But next up, we have Honeycoat, which was a star power for Bia, and this was also a bit controversial within the community. This star power basically gave her an extra life, but it was in the form of her staying at 1 HP for like 3 seconds before losing that immunity, and then suddenly she would be dead unless she had managed to kill the opponents, which was somewhat unlikely. Personally, I think it was really just a good star power for solo showdown at the end of the game to get you that little bit of immunity you needed to get a first or second place finish. But outside of that, it wasn't all that great, and it would end up getting replaced with Honeycomb, and this was also just as, if not more, controversial than Honeycoat. What this star power did was give Bia a 20% shield when her attack is supercharged, and this shield would stay until she used her attack, and after some time this was also increased to a 30% shield, and this was just an annoying star power to face against because Bia will be taking less damage, of course, and this always gave her the upper hand in solo showdown in most cases. Plus, people also didn't like it just because of her first star power, which basically rewarded you for missing, and overall it just made Bia be seen as an annoying brawler to play against because both her star powers were just annoying to deal with. But next up, we've got Tin Can, which was a star power for Mr. P. This star power made it so that his home base would have 3000 more health, but this wasn't really all that useful. I mean, its purpose was to make it so you can push further and for longer, which kind of worked, but it just wasn't all that effective, and therefore it obviously got removed. And it would get replaced with Revolving Door, and this was a star power that also actually changed as well, but just kept the same name. Originally, it made porters spawn 3 seconds faster, meaning they went from 4 seconds all the way down to 1, meaning as soon as one died, another one would almost instantly come to replace it, which is why it was called Revolving Door. But this was just a little too overpowered, and is why it ended up getting reworked to just make the porters deal more damage and have more health, which was still good, but definitely not as strong as making them spawn almost instantly. Next, we have Balls of Fire, which was a star power for Penny. What did this was turn the cannonballs from her turret into fireballs, which would set the ground on fire in a circular area for 3 seconds, and it would deal 400 damage per second. And this star power kind of got removed and kind of didn't. So basically, the fire area ability was just turned into a part of her super, meaning that it would now always just shoot fireballs normally, no matter what star power you had equipped. And it got renamed to Master Blaster and got changed so that now the cannonball would do 1000 damage and also provide knockback, meaning it had somewhat of the same purpose as before, since her Balls of Fire star power was mainly used to keep enemies back because it created a burning radius where you couldn't go, and this could be good for game modes like Hot Zone or something similar. And as most of you are aware, Master Blaster also is kind of similar since it knocks them back, but it's definitely not as strong as Balls of Fire was. Also, in the same update that removed this star power, her other star power, Last Blast, was also removed and replaced with Heavy Coffers, but personally I didn't think this was as interesting, so it's not a part of the main list. But finally, we have Incendiary, which was a star power for Brock. This star power made it so his rockets left burns wherever they impacted, and if an enemy stepped onto them, then it would do some damage over time. And this was a pretty iconic star power that had actually been around for over 4 years before it ended up getting removed. I'm not really too sure as to why they removed it, since it seemed pretty balanced and unproblematic to me, but it did end up getting removed and got replaced with more rockets, and the name pretty much gives it away, since this star power just made it so Brock could fire 4 more rockets with his super, and this was pretty useful. Overall, I think this was probably the most balanced change, since both of these star powers were balanced themselves, and there wasn't too big of a difference in the power of one versus the other. Very early on in the game, it was actually possible to complete Brawl Stars. This was because they had actually set a limit on the number of trophies you could earn for each brawler, which was set at just 500, and there were only 16 brawlers in the game at the time. So if you do the math, then that meant the max trophies was only at 8,000, and people reached that a lot quicker than the devs anticipated, so it was soon removed. And looking back at that, it's crazy how far the game has come to where people are now able to get 100,000 trophies, which is just insane. The next thing on the list is that there used to be a way you could just directly buy brawlers. I know you can obviously buy them from the shop, but very early on in the game, you literally had the option to buy every single brawler by using a currency called chips. This was a currency that you mainly got if you received a duplicate brawler. The brawler would be converted into chips depending on its rarity, and then those chips could be used to unlock other brawlers. This was a very old progression system in the game, and it obviously got changed since many people didn't really enjoy it for a multitude of reasons that I won't really get into in this video. The next thing is the original tutorial in the game. The tutorial has been changed a couple of times, but those changes haven't really been that big, and the tutorial is still essentially the same, but the original tutorial in the game was completely different. This would teach you how to hide in the grass, and instead of killing 4 robots, you would have to kill 3 bull and 3 dynamites, which is really just kind of random looking back at it now, but that is how it was when the game was first available. The next thing was probably one of the most annoying things about the early days of Brawl Stars, and that was the fact that you had to individually cycle through each brawler by tapping on them if you wanted to select it for your next match. This was really just an extremely annoying thing to do, because if you accidentally double tap, then you could miss your brawler and would just have to go through the cycle again. But thankfully the devs have changed it now, so you can just click on whatever brawler you want to play, and it's really just as easy as that. And the next thing on the list is something that was just extremely broken, and that was the fact that using a phone just allowed you to see a lot farther than players on the tablet. This is because Brawl Stars was originally played vertically, and phone screens and tablet screens obviously have different aspect ratios, so playing on a phone allowed you to see farther ahead than someone that was playing on a tablet. The devs obviously ended up fixing this so it would be the same for all devices, and later on they also ended up changing the whole format into a horizontal game, which is how most people know of Brawl Stars today. The next thing on the list is the coin doublers and coin boosters. These are different from the token doublers that are currently in the game. These old ones operated on a timed basis, unlike the current ones which have a limit on how much you can actually earn. So this essentially just made the coin boosters extremely useful, and people used it to progress through the game extremely quickly and easily, which is why the devs removed them and replaced it with the system we currently have. Next up, it used to be that Nita could essentially just spawn in an infinite amount of bears. Many people soon figured out just how OP this was, since you could basically just take over the entire map with bears, and that obviously made it extremely unfair for the enemy team. So the devs quickly changed it to add a limit where every time you spawn in a new bear, an older one dies to make sure you can't just spawn in an infinite amount. Next up, we have something from before the game was even launched, and that was the fact that Brawl Stars wasn't even supposed to be Brawl Stars. It originally was supposed to be a space-themed shooter game called Project Laser, but the devs obviously ended up not following through with that. They ended up giving it a very Western theme before transitioning to something more modern, which is what we now know the game as. And that also brings me to my next point, and that is the fact that Brawl Stars was extremely Western themed in its early stages. Obviously, it still has Western themes today, but back in the original betas, the game was just extremely Western. The whole UI for the game was different, and they really were focusing on the old school Wild West look, which is also why a lot of the original brawlers have that Western look to them. And that does also bring me to the next two things that only veterans will remember. The first of those is that Mortis actually used to have a hat, but when the game went into global launch, his hat was randomly removed, and that caused a lot of players to be just confused and angry, since it really just didn't make any sense. The devs ended up changing it so that there would be a new skin where the Mortis had this famous top hat, but the original skin still doesn't have it. And the second thing is that Pam actually used to be called Mama J. Now, this wasn't actually something that fully made it into the game. Instead, it was something shown in the dev build when the devs were showing Pam, and over there they had her named as Mama J. But when she ended up getting added to the game, her name was officially Pam, since the devs thought that was better than having her called Mama J. And let me know down in the comments which one you prefer, Pam or Mama J. But moving on to our next thing on the list, we have a game mode which is extremely different, and this was Heist. Originally, Heist had one attacking team and one defending team, and as you can guess, the attacking team obviously played offensively, while the defending team played defensively. The biggest problem with this was that the game mode was extremely unbalanced, and if you were on the wrong team, you were almost guaranteed to lose, which is why they now have changed Heist so that both teams have to attack and defend, which in my opinion is much more fun and balanced. Next up, Hyper's attack in the early days of Brawl Stars was actually called Para Strike, before it got changed to Gunbrella, which is what most people have only known it as. This attack is basically a sniper shot that comes out of an umbrella, but the umbrella has a bit of a fancy name called the parasol, which really just means the same thing, but in French it means beach umbrella, in case that mattered to anyone. So that's why it used to be called Parastrike, but now it's Gunbrella, which honestly I feel like makes less sense than the original name since it's a sniper and not a normal gun that can shoot multiple rounds. But I guess it is more understandable for most players. But this also does bring me to the next fact, and that is that this attack had an extremely long range in the beta. It basically took up the whole screen on most devices, and this is because, like I mentioned earlier, different devices could see different ranges. So with the Piper's attack, one person could just shoot across the entire map, and the other person would have no idea and wouldn't really see it coming, which was just really broken and OP, and is obviously why the range got nerfed quite a bit. Next up on the list, we have a currency that was removed, and that is the elixir. This is a resource that was common across multiple Supercell games, including Brawl Stars, until it was removed early on in the beta. You could use elixir to upgrade different statistics of the brawlers, but like with many other currencies and features, this ended up getting removed as they switched to a different progression system, and the elixir was essentially replaced by power points. And next up, clubs were actually called bands when the game first came out. This is because Brawl Stars was very focused on a Wild West theme, like I mentioned earlier, but as it started shifting away from that, a lot of things changed, including the name of what we all know as a club in the current game. This was really just to fit the newer theme with things like cities and other modern things. The next thing on the list is the Robo Rumble game mode, which was quite different in the beta. Back then, the safe was at the bottom of the map and the robots spawned on top and basically just worked their way down to get to the safe, which is obviously different than how it is today, and only players who played in the beta would have had the chance to experience that. Next up, we have the rarity boxes, and these are kind of like brawl boxes, but specifically for brawlers. The rarity boxes obviously came in different rarities and would give a random brawler of that rarity. It was removed a while ago and got replaced with the brawler offers, which are purchasable by gems and pretty much acted like the same thing. Next up, the grass in the game actually used to regrow after it got destroyed, which realistically does make sense. But it did make the game harder as you couldn't exactly just clear the grass to make sure people weren't just hiding in it, and that's why the ability ended up getting removed. And the grass regrowing also only worked with a certain type of grass, which was a little interesting to me since you would think all types would be able to grow back. And finally, we have a really broken brawler ability, and that was Daryl's roll. He used to be able to pretty much just roll across the entire map, and that was extremely broken. But it was also a little fun to play around with, though at the end of the day, more people use it to just have a massive advantage, and that is why Brawl Stars ended up making the ability a lot more balanced and realistic. Gadgets were introduced to Brawl Stars in March of 2020, but since then over 150 have been added into the game, but a handful have been removed for various reasons, and today we'll be going over every gadget that was removed to see what they were and why they got removed. So let's get right into it. First up, we have Power Surge, which was a gadget for Surge, and it was his first one, with him having it at launch. And this one was quite controversial, with some people saying it was completely broken and overpowered, while others were saying that it was fine. This gadget will let him teleport 3 tiles ahead of wherever he was facing, and you could basically just use this without any sort of delay or cooldown, and it was a really good way to just get around places. But obviously it was much stronger when used in actual combat situations. And personally, I definitely do think that this gadget was extremely powerful and definitely deserves to get removed, and I really don't get why anyone would think that it was balanced in any way. One reason for this is because this gadget would literally let him teleport through walls and just surprise enemies, and there was very little they could do. I forget what the exact numbers were, but basically if the enemy brawler has less than somewhere around 4,500 health, then they would just almost instantly die because you could unload 3 shots from Surge really fast, and unless you missed, you were almost guaranteed to kill the enemy unless they had some godlike reaction time. Plus, even outside of just murking unsuspecting brawlers, the teleporting was also a little too good at being able to gain and maintain control on certain maps, and especially for certain game modes like Gem Grab or Heist. And you were able to gain control since you could kind of be everywhere at once, and it was definitely very annoying to play against. And this gadget also had a very obvious use, which was just be able to run away quickly, which is also something that enemies just hated since you could teleport away from a fight if you were getting low, and if there was cover nearby, then enemies really couldn't do much other than just try and catch up. And I mean, all of that is essentially why the Power Surge gadget was so strong, and people had been complaining about it for so long, and were asking for it to get nerfed, but it never did. And instead, like 2 years later, Supercell just completely reworked the gadget and turned it into something completely new that would basically give Surge 2 upgrades for 10 seconds, and even this was quite strong, so it ended up getting nerfed to just 1 upgrade, and I think it's fairly balanced now. But next up we have Backup Mine, which was a gadget for Tick, and it was added in March of 2020 and was removed almost exactly 1 year later. What this gadget did was make Tick dash forward, kind of similar to Surge's teleportation, and it placed a single mine that would do 700 damage. Yeah, I mean, that was about it. I suppose the dashing could be pretty useful, but him just placing 1 mine really didn't do much. I mean, what was a single mine going to do? This was a pretty useless gadget in my opinion, and I didn't really like it, but it was the only Tick gadget in the game for about 11 months, so I guess no one really had a choice in using it or not. And when Last Hurrah was added in April 2021, pretty much everyone would instantly switch over to it, and the Backup Mine gadget had really just become a meme because of how bad it was. And in March of 2021, just a month after Last Hurrah was added, Backup Mine ended up getting removed and got replaced with Mine Mania, which just made it so that Tick's next attack would shoot 6 mines, which was double the normal amount. And in all honesty, this wasn't too great of a gadget either, but I mean, it definitely was an improvement from Backup Mine. But next up, we actually have 2 gadgets that both belong to the same brawler, who was Penny, and both of these were removed at the same time during a massive rework of Penny, which also removed and replaced her previous star powers. But first up, we have the Pocket Detonator, and it was her first gadget since it came out in March of 2020 in the Gadgets update. What this gadget did was blow up her turret, and this would cause it to obviously deal damage and knock back whatever was around it. Plus, it could also blow up walls, which could be pretty useful. And the main sort of problem with this was that it was really just a gadget that you could only use in relatively close range situations, and its main purpose was really to just counter assassins like Edgar. And the problem with this was obviously that Penny was a long range brawler, so a gadget that helped with long range things will be more useful in most cases. And well, in a major rework in June of 2022, this gadget was changed, so it was now called Salty Barrel, and it was completely reworked so that it would drop a barrel that acted like a barrier to protect her, and it would also make her attack deal splash damage. And so this was obviously a much better gadget in my opinion, since it really played well into her long range by giving her protection and enhancing her attack. Also, the pocket detonator gadget would kind of get reworked into a star power called Master Blaster, and what this did would make the cannon deal 1000 damage and also deal knockback when it was deployed, so it was pretty similar to the gadget except that it just couldn't destroy walls. But her second gadget was called Captain's Compass, and it was added to the game just 5 months after the first one, and it was also arguably one of the worst gadgets in the game at the time. What it did was make her cannon shoot 5 cannonballs onto her whenever you activated the gadget, and while this obviously seemed like it could come in useful, in reality it just never really worked out how you wanted it. First of all, if you use the gadget right after placing the cannon, then all 5 cannonballs wouldn't come out. Most people said that they only got around 2 to 3, and I'm not exactly sure what the mechanics behind it were, but it was something about spawnable things having some sort of short delay, so that would obviously be a problem in tight situations where you don't have like that extra second to waste of you just waiting. And therefore a lot of people didn't really like it. Plus the cannonballs would also just stop coming out after you died, so it wasn't even any sort of last ditch gadget you could use right before you knew you were going to die, because the cannonballs would just stop coming out and it would prove to be pretty useless. So it obviously ended up getting completely reworked and its name got changed to Trusty Spyglass, and it instead now made the cannon just shoot at every visible brawler in range. And this was definitely better than what it was before, but it was still just alright in my opinion and wasn't anything exactly too special. But next up we have Auto Aimer, which was a gadget for Piper, and this was basically removed just 2 months after being added in the gadgets update, and this was because it honestly just sucked. It shot 4 tiny bullets that would deal 500 damage each, and while they were advertised as homing bullets, they would really only ever hit their targets if they were moving in a straight line or were already very close to you. And even if they hit, then they obviously still didn't do much damage, so that gadget ended up being pretty useless since it really wouldn't help defend her, and if like a tank was already very close to her, then she was almost guaranteed to lose. So it ended up getting reworked just 2 months later, and while the name stayed the same, what ended up changing was that it was only 1 bullet now instead of 4, and it would do 100 damage, but it would also deal knockback and slow down whatever it hit. And this was way more useful than how the auto aimer gadget was before, and a ton of people were really happy with this change. But finally we have Heat Ejector, which was a gadget for Carl, and this one actually ended up getting worse after the rework. Originally it would drop hot rocks, and for every second an enemy was stepping on them for, it would deal 600 damage. And this was actually really good when you paired it with his super, as you would be able to get quite a bit of DPS if the enemy brawler stepped on the hot rocks. Plus, it was also really good on heists for stacking the damage onto the safe, which was really strong, but with the rework the damage wouldn't be stackable anymore, and instead it would just deal 1200 damage over a period of 4 seconds if someone stepped on the rocks just once. And this was really just such a nerf, since obviously the gadget wouldn't be useful in heist anymore, which was the main thing it was really good for. But it has also been argued about whether or not the rework actually was a nerf, so let me know down in the comments what you guys think. And with that, we're also at the end of the video, so hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.